2020, PBS secara resmi mendirikan 9 klaster penelitian. Dengan salah satu misi untuk mengembangkan dan meningkatkan fasilitas dan infrastruktur pendukung bagi ekonomi dan keuangan syariah di Indonesia, PBS menyelenggarakan berbagai pelatihan yang ditujukan untuk akademisi, industri, regulator, dan masyarakat umum. Selain itu, pada tahun 2020, PBS memperkenalkan program Summer School dalam bidang ekonomi dan keuangan syariah pertama di Indonesia yang terdiri dari kelas Islamic Finance Practice Course dan Islamic Finance Course for Academicians. Tidak hanya itu, sebagai institusi di bawah FEB UI, PBS secara berkala mempersembahkan seminar dan webinar yang disajikan dalam bentuk online lecture session, interactive discussion, maupun case study, serta edukasi ekonomi syariah yang disajikan dalam bentuk video, infografis, dan juga survei singkat. Dan dalam rangka mendukung pendidikan tinggi, PBS juga secara berkala membuka program magang. Melalui core values kami, yakni adaptive, inovatif, and insightful, PBS berkomitmen untuk menjadi yang terdepan dalam mendorong perkembangan ekonomi dan keuangan syariah untuk pembangunan Indonesia dan masyarakat global yang lebih adil, sejahtera, dan berkelanjutan. Berawal dari visi besar untuk menjadi institusi terdepan di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis syariah untuk pembangunan Indonesia dan masyarakat global, pada tahun 2007, Pusat Ekonomi dan Bisnis Syariah atau PEBS resmi didirikan. PEBS merupakan institusi di bawah Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Indonesia yang ditujukan untuk menjadi Center of Excellence bagi kegiatan penelitian, konsultasi, pelatihan, dan pengabdian masyarakat sesuai kebutuhan akademik, industri, dan masyarakat. Selama 14 tahun berdiri, PBS telah membangun kerjasama akademik dan non-akademik, serta melayani konsultasi dan advokasi yang berkaitan dengan ekonomi, bisnis, dan keuangan syariah, serta ekonomi pembangunan, dengan mitra yang berasal dari lembaga nasional dan internasional. Pada tahun 2020, PBS secara resmi mendirikan 9 klaster penelitian. Dengan salah satu misi untuk mengembangkan dan meningkatkan fasilitas dan infrastruktur pendukung bagi ekonomi dan keuangan syariah di Indonesia, PBS menyelenggarakan berbagai pelatihan yang ditujukan untuk akademisi, industri, regulator, dan masyarakat umum. Selain itu, pada tahun 2020, PBS memperkenalkan program Summer School dalam bidang ekonomi dan keuangan syariah pertama di Indonesia yang terdiri dari kelas Islamic Finance Practice Course dan Islamic Finance Course for Academicians. Tidak hanya itu, sebagai institusi di bawah FEB UI, PEBS secara berkala mempersembahkan seminar dan webinar yang disajikan dalam bentuk online lecture session, interactive discussion, maupun case study, serta edukasi ekonomi syariah yang disajikan dalam bentuk video, infografis, dan juga survei singkat. Dan dalam rangka mendukung pendidikan tinggi, PEBS juga secara berkala membuka program magang. Melalui core values kami, yakni adaptive, inovatif, and insightful, PEBS berkomitmen untuk menjadi yang terdepan dalam mendorong perkembangan ekonomi dan keuangan syariah untuk pembangunan Indonesia dan masyarakat global yang lebih adil, sejahtera, dan berkelanjutan.
Okay, check. We will start the event. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all distinguished speakers, moderator, and all participants from all over the world. Welcome to side event of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia, Rethinking the Role of Islamic Social Finance in Achieving SDGs. It's a precious honor for me, Afida, Program Associate in Center of Islamic Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, to become Master of Ceremony in this event. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share the agenda of this event. Firstly, we will hear opening remarks from Dr. Arif Wibisono Lubis, continued by keynote speech remarks from panelists, and then moderated discussion where all participants are welcome to join to ask questions for the panelists by typing the questions by the Q&A feature. This webinar will explore the substantial role of Islamic social finance in achieving the SDGs. The eminent speakers will explain and discuss the development of the Islamic social finance sector, the impact of this sector, how it relates to the achievement of SDGs, opportunities, and challenges faced by this sector, as well as relevant recommendations for related stakeholders. Without any further ado, to start the event, we will hear the opening remarks from Dr. Arif Wibisono Lubis, as Vice Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. To Dr. Arif, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Afida. Warmest greetings to Professor Bambang Brojonegoro, lead co-chair of the T20 Indonesia and professor at FEB-UI, Dr. Sami Al-Suwailam, Director General of Islamic Development Bank Institute, Professor Azmi Omar, President and Chief Executive Officer of International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, or INSEF. Mr. Al-Tayyib Al-Dajani, Economic Advisor of UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. Dr. Rahmatina Awaliyah Kasri, Director of Center for Islamic Economics and Business, or PBS, and lecturer at the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Dr. Ronald Rulindo, lecturer of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, and also the moderator of this event, and all participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Praise and gratitude are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his permission and the abundance of his blessings. We can all gather in this seminar with the theme Rethinking the Role of Islamic Social Finance in Achieving SDGs, organized by the Center for Islamic Economics and Business, FEBUI, in collaboration with Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia. It is indeed an honor for me to welcome all of you on behalf of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, many omnipresent challenges ranging from poverty, social inequality, and energy crisis to environmental adversities are in desperate need of solutions. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, give us an excellent framework for answers and envisage a revitalized global and unconventional post-capitalist partnership for sustainable development. However, to implement the 2030 Agenda of SDGs, we must mobilize more funding channels. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the annual global SDGs financing gap was $2.5 trillion. And during and after the pandemic, the number is expected to increase by 70% and reach $4.2 trillion. One of the sectors that can become a vital, innovative financing modality to fill the SDGs funding gap is Islamic finance. The core principles of Islamic finance, such as channeling funds to the real economy by promoting risk sharing, avoiding excessive speculations, and limiting debt to value to value of assets, are highly aligned with the spirit of the SDGs. The fundamental goals of the SDGs are also congruent with the Maqasid al-Sharia, or the higher objectives of Sharia, which are the preservation of 5 essentials of human well-being: religion, life, intellect, lineage, and property. Besides, 2 prominent instruments of Islamic social finance, zakat and waqf, have proven significantly to promote economic opportunities with their wealth distribution specialty. As such, it is essential to explore and discuss the substantial role of Islamic social finance in achieving the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2018, Islamic Development Bank estimated that the zakat collection reached between 230 and 560 billion US dollars worldwide annually. Even during economic turbulence due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of zakat has been significant, notably in mitigating social and economic problems. As for Islamic microfinance, for example, the poor and needy can uplift themselves from poverty through Islamic microfinance institutions that provide interest-free loan schemes. By looking at the enormous potential of Islamic social finance, especially zakat and waqf, various global collaborative efforts have been carried out, one of which is through the formulation and implementation of zakat and waqf core principles for the assurance of a more professional zakat and waqf management. Therefore, more innovation and collaboration from regional and global stakeholders are still required to elevate Islamic social finance's role in attaining the SDGs. I sincerely hope this seminar will yield invaluable insights on how to intensify that role. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing their valuable knowledge. Also, I would like to express my warmest appreciation to all the committees that organized this event. I hope this seminar can provide a comprehensive picture about the role of Islamic social finance in achieving SDGs. Once again, welcome, and please enjoy today's webinar. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I return the floor back to Ms. Afida.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Arif, for opening our event. Next, we will move to the keynote session. I would like to invite Professor Bambang Brojonegoro to deliver his keynote speech. Professor Bambang Brojonegoro is currently the lead co-chair of T20 Indonesia, as well as lead co-chair of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia. He is a professor of economics at the University of Indonesia, and he also held several positions as the Minister of Republic of Indonesia, starting as the Minister of Finance from 2015 until 2016, Minister of Development Planning from 2016 until 2019, and Minister of Research and Technology from 2019 until 2021. Professor Bambang Brojonegoro, the screen is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished panelists, especially Excellency President of IDB, Dr. Asmi Omar, and also Ibu Rahmatina, and all other speakers, panelists, moderators, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of T20 Indonesia, let me convey my apology not to be involving directly with this event, since I am in the activity in Seoul, South Korea. But today's topic is certainly very important in one of our main topics in T20. It is about financing for SDG achievement. And certainly we know that SDG already being kind of a main goal of every countries in the world, ratified by United Nations back in 2015. However, we already face, I think, a bigger challenge when COVID-19 strike us back in 2020, in which, of course, our effort to achieve SDG 2030 will be very much interrupted by what happened with COVID-19. And before we are talking about the impact of COVID-19, we can see that some countries, including Indonesia, already tried very hard to achieve several goals. Not, of course, all goals, but usually prioritize on several goals of 17 goals of SDG. In the case of Indonesia, despite the setback created by COVID-19, the government of Indonesia still committed trying to improve the effort to achieve each goal of 17 goals of SDG. As you can see on the slide, if we look at 17 goals, there are goals that now in the stage of improving to achieve the 2030. And those includes, for example, goal number 1, which is very crucial, no poverty. And then goal number 2, about food security. Goal number 3, which is good because we are talking about better health condition while we are facing the COVID-19. And of course, there are also the improving aspect on goal number 5, trying to improve gender equality, and then goal number 7 related to the renewable energy, affordable and clean energy, and goal number 9 about industry and infrastructure, basically about economic development in general, and another important thing, goal number 10, trying to reduce inequality. And certainly also there is another important goal that improving, which is goal number 13, about climate action. But even though those goals, including goal number 16, already on the improving stage, only few goals already in line with the target of SDG 2030. Those are goal number 4, about education, goal number 6, clean water and sanitation, and goal number 12 about responsible production and consumption, plus goal number 8 about decent work and economic growth. So we have 4 goals that already on track to achieve SDG 2030, several other goals that already improving, but then there are also goals that basically stagnating. I mean, we don't know whether they will be able to do acceleration to achieve SDG 2030, and those will include, for example, goal number 11 about sustainable cities and communities, and also goal number 14, life below water. And Indonesia, don't forget, Indonesia is a maritime country. Goal number 15, life on land, and goal number 17 about partnership. So with this picture, of course, Indonesia is not far behind in terms of achievement, but still we still have big room to do improvement, especially to really prioritize on several goals that now improving in order to be in line with SDG 2030. However, as we know that to achieve SDG 2030, we need, massive funding, development financing. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the financing gap for achieving SDG has become bigger. Not only because originally the gap is already quite big, the gap between the needs to achieve SDG 2030 and the fiscal capability of each government to achieve SDG is relatively big, but also the COVID-19 already reallocated some of the funding to achieve SDG into other urgent and necessary needs, and other urgent and important needs. So certainly, if we look around the world, for example, if we look at the depth of many areas in the world, especially developing economy, we can see that not only developing economy experience the increasing depth, but it happens also in developed economy. So certainly higher debt will create, more distress in terms of financing for SDG 2030. And with the higher government debt to GDP ratio, plus, of course, the rising commodity that creates high inflation, then, of course, the pressure on debt sustainability becomes bigger. And certainly, with the higher cost of funding, it will be challenging to find new resources to finance the gap for SDG 2030. So looking only at the public finance and public debt will not resolve the issue, as we can see. So it means that we have to move to the new types of SDG financing in terms of what we call blended financing. And blended financing is very much needed to leverage basically private investment. Of course, when we are talking about SDG, it's not just government goal. It means that it should not rely only on government money or public budget. It has to incorporate, the ability of private sector to their financing capability, as well as this is the newest one that has been discussed quite a lot during the T20 summit in Bali, the participation of philanthropic funders. So philanthropic funding or philanthropic financing has been there for quite some time. Some of them are quite big all over the world, but then they work on their own and they work on their own mission. While now we have common mission to achieve SDG 2030. So the question on blended financing on how to incorporate both private capital and philanthropic funding into the blended finance structure that also includes, of course, public money. So this is how the effort of blended financing should get the priority. And of course, the goal of blended finance structure is to mobilize more private capital other than providing concessional capital. I mean, concessional capital already provided by, for example, multilateral development banks, including Islamic Development Bank, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and others. But then sometimes to achieve SDG or to achieve certain goals in SDG, the concessional financing still may be a little bit too high in terms of cost financing. We need to bring it lower by creating the kind of design stage grant, guarantee or risk insurance, as well as technical assistance. Of course, to reduce the risk and to reduce the cost of funding. And there are several examples of structure on the blended finance. For example, private equity or debt funds with concessional public or philanthropic funding that could attract institutional investment. So it will attract more liquidity, but with relatively lower cost of funding. Or the structure could be in terms of bond or note issuance, often for infrastructure projects, with guarantee or insurance from public or philanthropic funders. And I think it has been done in Indonesia as well as other countries around the globe. And then another structure would be grant funding from public or philanthropic funders to build capacity of investment to achieve expected financial and social return. So again, we would like to incorporate more participation of private sector in achieving certain goals of SDGs. Of course, this will be like optional action from private sector, but it could be made more obligatory by creating a good scheme that will include grant funding, so the private capital becomes more attractive to participate in all public sector activities as well as certain goals of SDG 2030. And then another structure would be grant funding from public or philanthropic funders to design or structure projects to attract institutional investment. And this has happened a lot in, for example, renewable energy project, in which private sector will be very much interested. They already ready with the so-called green financing, but then the structure has to be enriched with the contribution either from public budget or from philanthropic funders. So at least the cost of funding will be lower and the risk sharing can be implemented. And if we look the activities of blended finance sector so far from 2015 to prior to COVID-19, we can see that renewable energy sector especially, has been the biggest beneficiary, followed by financial services, agriculture, and general activities. So in general, if you look at the top three, energy, financial services, agriculture, it already matches with several goals of SDG. Of course, we are talking about the goals about affordable and clean energy, the goal of related to reducing inequality through financial inclusion, as well as the goals of food security and responsible consumption that can be done through agricultural activities. Plus, there has been also a good blended financing distribution for infrastructure investment. And part of the blended finance, as I mentioned, is what we call is social finance. And the social finance could be coming from the philanthropic, and part of the philanthropic could be in terms of Islamic finance. Because if we look at Islamic finance in more detail, that will be a significant part of the so-called charity and also willingness to support others who have disadvantage compared, of course, to some group of people who have the ability, who have the wealth and ability to help the others. And of course, in Indonesia, Islamic finance has been growing quite significantly. And the best thing about Islamic finance is their principle by limiting debt to the value of assets, avoiding excessive speculation. So in general, trying to create the financial sector more stable and also channeling funding to real sector. And this is important because we are not talking about channeling financing only from one aspect of financial sector to the other, but we are trying to create direct linkage between financial sector, which is Islamic financial sector, with the real sector. And Islamic finance already has several tools that will be, significant in promoting more social finance in achieving SDG 2030. That will include zakat, sedekah, waqf, and sukuk. And all of those already align with the idea or with the spirit of Sustainable Development Goals. And as we know, in SDG, we always say no one left behind. And if we look at several instruments of Islamic finance itself, we can see number one, waqf or wakaf, usually what we call in Indonesia. So there are huge potential of wakaf for SDGs. For example, if we are talking about wakaf land, total area of wakaf land in Indonesia already 4.4 billion meter square, spread over more than 400,000 locations throughout the country. And then the benefits of wakaf land can be alternative source of funds, especially for the welfare of society and poverty alleviation. Certainly, goal number 1 and goal number 10 will be aligned with the huge potential of wakaf. However, from that 4.4 billion meter square, only 66% of them already certified. And then if we look at the use of wakaf land, mostly used for, of course, religious purpose like mosque, prayer room, and also for education purpose like school, and also for graveyard, and also Islamic boarding school. So it means there are still a lot of potential to develop waqf into something more productive that can be helpful in fulfilling the financial gap for SDG 2030. And then another instrument that already quite familiar for many of us is sukuk or Islamic bonds. And sukuk, of course, can be issued to reduce SDGs financing gap. And when we are trying to talk about sukuk, sukuk can also be modified to be like green sukuk. So sukuk that can be accumulated in order to finance the green project, the green activities that will help us to achieve for example, the net zero emission target faster. And if we look at some of SDG goals that's still stagnating, unfortunately, some of them related to the environmental issue. And I hope the use of sukuk more for green activities will be helping to change the status from stagnating into improving. And I think that will be the big challenge in terms of the use of the sukuk itself. But then if we are talking about the cumulative sukuk, the sukuk that has been accumulated so far, I think the amount has been quite big. And although the market is not yet dynamic, but still, sukuk I think government sukuk has been one of the potential sources to reduce the financing gap for achieving SDG 2030. And of course, majority of the sukuk accumulation has been used mostly for infrastructure projects and also for projects related to the idea of sustainability, reducing the gap, reducing inequality, as well as effort to reduce the poverty. Another instrument that is, I think, quite interesting is cash swap link sukuk, CWLS. CWLS link cash swap to the sukuk instrument into a single product to be utilized in productive programs that support the development of community social welfare. So the first thing about this type of waqf is this is cash waqf. So it's a bit different with the waqf in the form of land that I already discussed before. This is cash waqf, and cash waqf can be dedicated into single product and utilized for productive programs that will be in line with some of the SDGs goal. For example, if we are talking about social program related to SDGs goal number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 8, and 10 is like scholarship for underprivileged students, capital assistance and empowerment of small and medium enterprise, community empowerment and capital assistance for farm animals, rice barn work, and also procurement of retina and cataract mobile screening for health purpose, of course. So those are the potential activities that can be used by utilizing cash FOF link sukuk. And I believe the potential is quite big, although if we look at the issuance, the 3 issuance that already done, I mean, the number is still limited, but I believe this is the area to improve in the future, and we need to campaign more for participation of potential, of course, investor, potential social finance for cash FOF link sukuk. Hopefully, CWLS will be one of the important instrument to help Indonesia achieving SDG 2030. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Bambang Brojonegoro, for such enlightening speech with the rich insight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming to the panelist session, which will be moderated by Dr. Ronald Rolindo. Dr. Ronald is the lecturer of Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, and head of Islamic Social Finance Research Cluster in Center of Islamic Economics and Business, as known as PEBS FEB-UI. He also held professional track record as Director of Product Innovation, Financial Market, and Strengthening Sharia Financial Infrastructure in Islamic Finance National Committee, or KNKS, in 2019, Head of Islamic Banking Surveillance Division, Head of International Affairs Division, and Chief Specialist of Research Division in Indonesia Deposit Insurance Corporation, as known as LPS, Lembaga Penjamin Simpanan, in 2013. Well, it's for introduction. Without any further ado, over to you, Dr. Ronald Rolindo.
Thank you so much, Afida, for your kind introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very good morning to good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone. I would like to welcome you again to today's webinar, Rethinking the Role of Islamic Social Finance in Achieving SDGs. This topic is very important, not only because the ultimate objective of Islamic finance as addressed in Maqasid Sharia are reflected in SDGs, but also to provide significant evidence that Islamic finance, particularly Islamic social finance, has successfully contributed to the implementation of SDGs initiative. Today, we have 4 panelists joining us: Dr. Sami Al-Sualim from IDB, Professor Asmi Omar, my professor from INSAFE, Mr. Al-Tayyib Al-Jani from UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, and Dr. Rahmatina Aulia Kasri from University of Indonesia. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to deliver the remarks, and after that, we will have Q&A sessions. Well, our first speaker will be Dr. Sami Al-Sualim. Dr. Sami is currently Acting Director General of Islamic Research and Training Institute, Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. He was previously Deputy Director of IRTI and then Head of Financial Product Development Center. Dr. Sami Al-Sualim held membership in several professional committees, including Technical Committee of the Islamic Financial Services Board, Economic Committee of Awqaf, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs in Riyadh, Academic Committee in Islamic Fiqh Academy of Muslim World League. Dr. Sami Al-Sualim obtained his MA from Southern Illinois University in 1990, and his PhD was from Washington University, St. Louis, Missouri in 1995. Mr. Al-Sualim is the first recipient for Hyman Minsky Prize for distinguished performance in macroeconomics offered by Washington University. Dr. Sami, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and thanks to the organizers of this important event. And I commend the valuable contributions and the very important insight of the lecture of Professor Bambang. Thanks very much for this very important lecture. I wish we will be able to obtain a copy of the slides if possible. So I will have very brief comments on the SDGs from an Islamic point of view. And let me start with one very simple question. Those of us who studied economics, we always have this question: what are we supposed to economize on? Now, this very simple question is very fundamental, actually. And from an Islamic point of view, it turns out that to economize is actually part of an-nubuwah, prophethood. The Prophet ﷺ said, al-iqtisad juz'un min 24 juz'an min an-nubuwah. So to economize itself is an ethical value. It's a moral value from an Islamic point of view. Now, if you look at mainstream economics, the first thing that we learn and teach students is to maximize utility of consumption. So you can see the stark difference between the framework or the attitude of economizing on resources versus the objective of maximizing the utility of consumption. These are very two different views of how to deal with economic resources. And no wonder that the UN, sorry about this, only in 2015, they came to formulate sustainable development goals. Why do we have to formulate these sustainable development goals? Because what we teach, what we learn in mainstream economics, in 101 economics worldwide, it does not lead to sustainable development. And that's why we came to this situation in which the entire globe is under threat because of abuse and misuse of the resources. Now, if we look at the point of, economizing our resources, it means that we maximize the sustainability of these resources. Obviously, all material resources are depletable, right? Oil is depletable, gas is depletable. Now you can say the sun will not be depleted in probably 1,000 or 2,000 years, but the equipment that we use to capitalize on solar energy are depletable, they depreciate, and so on, and for other equipments and resources as well. So we need to use that energy to build more resources for the future. So everything will be depreciated, but the way to fight back depreciation is to build more productive resources for the future. And that is how we build sustainable resources for the future. Now, if you think about this, this means production has priority over consumption. This is not a purely philosophical question, which is more important, consumption or production? No, this is, in my opinion, this is a very fundamental question. Production has priority as long as the objective is to produce sustainable resources. Now, with this objective, time will be an asset. As time progresses, 3 years from now, if we take this approach, we will be building more sustainable resources than now. While if the objective is consumption or maximizing the utility of consumption, then time will be a liability. So if we want really to achieve sustainable development, we have to follow a sustainable approach. We have to build the human being, the mental framework or paradigm that will ensure that we develop sustainable resources in the future. It will not help if we talk about the private sector, that they should be participating in supporting or financing sustainable development. Well, guess what? The CEO and the CFO and other leaders of most corporations, they have studied economics and finance, and they studied that the objective is to maximize the value of shareholders. This will not help. This will not help. So we need to, since many of our colleagues here are leading universities, we have to redesign the curriculum. We have to rebuild the future generation so that those people who are now undergraduates or maybe at the final year of their school, graduate school, in a few years' time, they will be leading organizations, or even more, they might be leading government organizations. If the same mentality keeps going on, we will be losing, no matter how hard work we do now. If the next generation, which in only a few years will be leading the organizations, we will be losing if they have the same mentality that led to the problem that we are now trying to solve. So I would encourage, now, just to conclude, when we say social finance, is it for consumption or for production? So this approach, developing sustainable resources, is fundamental for commercial as well as for social activities. So even zakah, for example, are we using zakah only to feed the poor, or are we using zakah to help the poor get out of poverty? This approach is very important and very fundamental, and I'm sure my colleagues here and elsewhere are already working to internalize this strategy, but we really have to work hard on that dimension. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sami, for always entertaining presentation, and you ask really very important questions, what we're supposed to economize on, and you also explain what the time is actually a liability from the conventional economics. And you also have asked another interesting question about social finance. What is the purpose? Is it for consumption or to production? It's really really fun to warm up our mind this evening in Indonesia. We will come back to you later on with a question and answer, but next we have our second speaker, our beloved Professor Azmi Omar. Prof. Azmi Omar served as the President and Chief Executive Officer at the International Center of Education in Islamic Finance, or INSAFE. Prior to that, he was Director General of Islamic Research and Training Institute in IDB Jeddah. And he is also Senior Professor and University Administrator at the International Islamic University Malaysia for almost 30 years. Professor Azmi has advised and provided technical assistance to a number of IDB member countries in the implementation of Islamic finance. He is a member of the External Advisory Group for the International Monetary Fund, and he's also Board of Trustee of Responsible Finance Institute Foundations. Prof. Azmi was awarded the Most Outstanding Individual Contribution to Islamic Finance in the CLIF Islamic Finance Award 2015 and Lifetime Achievement Award in Islamic Economic and Finance and Third World Islamic Economic Finance Conference in Pakistan. Prof. Azmi, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dr. Ronald Ronaldo, the moderator, fellow panel speakers, Dr. Arif, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First, let me thank the university for inviting me to share my thoughts on these very important topics, what we call the Islamic social finance. I've been asked to look at the role of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs. Secondly, is to look at what are the challenges and issues that needs to be addressed if we want to use Islamic social finance to meet the objectives of SDGs, and finally, some relevant recommendations. I think at the onset, I do agree that the Islamic social finance has the potential to achieve the SDGs. It has the potential, but if you ask whether it has been providing that role to achieve SDGs, my answer would be still there is a lot of work needs to be done. But before that, let me just go on to look at, out of the 17 SDGs, we see the utilization of zakat, sadaqah, waqf, Qard Hasan microfinance as instruments that are currently being used in many jurisdictions, both in Southeast Asia, South Asia, MENA region, as well as Sub-Saharan Africa. For example, we see in the context of goal number 1, no poverty, zakat and sadaqah are being used not only, for example, providing monthly support but also providing business capital and equipments to do business. So again, the usage of zakat sadaqah, both for consumption as well as for production, in order to alleviate poverty and bring about, economic development for the poor. We also see in the context of goal number 2, zero hunger, the usage of zakat sadaqah for the asnaf categories of individuals. Again, giving money for them to live on, because we need to consider the usage of zakat sadaqah for short-term purposes as well as to bring about more productive through business capital. Third goal, good health and well-being. We see the utilization of zakat, waqf, and sadaqah, for example, for medical, for hospital, for schools, and related auxiliary equipments. So again, this has been implemented in many countries. As for goal number 4, quality education, again, usage of zakat, waqf, sadaqah to support quality education, not only in terms of education per se, but also in terms of education facilities, equipment, schools, and so on. So again, the successful examples of Islamic social finance instruments for goal number 4. What is interesting is if you look at goal number 5, gender equality, many of my colleagues are not comfortable with gender equality because to them, you don't see, for example, discussion about using Islamic social finance for gender equality. And I will not dwell into that. I will move on to goal number 6. That is basically clean water and sanitation. So again, you see the role of zakat, waqf, sadaqah for provision of clean water, sanitation, providing water filters and so on to ensure that the individuals are provided with the right water, clean water, as well as the right equipment. Goal number 7 is also being used. For example, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, reduce inequalities. Goal number 10, sustainable cities and communities using zakat and waqf, for example, for affordable housing, for example, even health provision of health facilities and so on. And also we have goal number 13, climate action, goal number 14, life below water, and finally, life on land. So using both zakat, sadaqah, and waqf and Islamic microfinance. So there are examples, successful examples of countries that have implemented Islamic social finance for the 17 SDGs. And as I mentioned, out of the 17, I would say 12 for example, are used in order to, 12 goals are used by the Islamic social finance instruments. But the question that comes to our mind is that we need to understand that Islamic social finance instrument is not the all-secret weapon or all-purposeful weapon to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It can support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, but it requires much more than Islamic social finance instrument, which means that we need, as example by Professor Bambang earlier on, using Islamic finance instruments as well. To answer the question as whether Islamic social finance can play its full role, I would say we need to understand a number of factors. One is that Islamic social finance is a recent phenomenon as compared to Islamic finance. Islamic banking, for example, started in the 70s, Islamic capital market and sukuk in the 90s, and today we see Islamic finance available in OIC and non-OIC countries, and asset size is estimated to be $3.6 trillion. However, if you look at the context of Islamic social finance, the estimation is still subjective. We do not have complete information in the context of the global Islamic social finance assets, or even for that matter, the global zakat collection. We do have bits and pieces in a number of countries. So as you can see, Islamic social finance is still new as opposed to Islamic finance. Secondly, Islamic social finance as an integrated model that we see today, combining zakat, waqf, Islamic microfinance, came only in early 2010, 2012, 2014. Prior to that, Islamic social finance is seen as disparate, which means that people were talking about zakat, wakaf alone without bringing them together as a tool to address poverty, as a tool to address financial inclusion and socio-economic development of Muslim countries. So again, Islamic social finance is a recent phenomenon. The third point that I want to share is that Islamic social finance is fragmented as opposed to Islamic finance. Islamic finance, we have clear, regulatory authorities, we have banks, or we have central banks, or we have financial services authority that looks after Islamic finance. However, Islamic social finance is fragmented. Some countries, it falls under religious ministries. In some countries, it's not at all. So there is a lot of fragmentation or no authority at all. And in some countries, Islamic social finance is organized by civil societies. In others, by state bodies or state-approved bodies. So again, the issue of fragmentation is there. I'll give an example. If you take the case of zakat collection, I think to me, the best zakat collection should be done by tax department as opposed to zakat organization. Because tax department have all the necessary infrastructure, the facilities and so on. But again, because ISF, Islamic social finance, is seen to be a religious kind of thing, as opposed to Islamic finance, therefore, it is still managed, say, for example, by religious ministry or no ministry at all. So this is the challenge that we have today. So because of the fragmentation, we cannot use Islamic social finance as a very powerful tool to address, as I mentioned, poverty alleviation or, for example, financial inclusion. Okay. There is also another issue that needs to be looked at is the issue of trust. If we say that government should manage, then can people trust government? And again, in some countries, there is a lack of trust in government. However, in other countries, people trust the government. So this is, again, the question that needs to be addressed. Another point is enabling environment. There is no enabling environment in some countries. I'm not saying that all countries, but there are in some countries no enabling environment, such as zakat and wakaf regulations, or even accounting standards, governance standards, and supervisory body. We do have, for example, in Indonesia, but again, it's not spread out to other countries, some of those core principles. Finally, I would say is that there is no standard Sharia resolution. Similar to Islamic finance, we do have different interpretation. In the case of Islamic social finance, we also have Sharia resolutions which are not standardized across all jurisdictions. And each jurisdiction may interpret differently. For example, zakat collected in one particular country, can it be used to support the mustahik in another country? For example, many views that it should be spent in that particular country, not beyond that country. So those are some of the views. The other example is, although I think to a certain extent Indonesia has addressed this, can zakat be collected from wages and salaries rather than from assets alone, from wealth alone? So those are the questions, and we see that not many jurisdictions or countries implement zakat on wages and salaries. So again, if you want to use zakat, wakaf, and so on as a powerful tool, there must be a comprehensive approach. So my recommendation to end this point, couple of recommendations. One is to develop enabling environment. I think we need to have the environment, the enabling environment for Islamic social finance, just like we have for banks, for takaful, for capital market and suku. We need to have enabling environment, regulations, accounting standards, governance framework, supervisory body for Islamic social finance. Second recommendation is to address the issue of trust. In this regard, I think a requirement for periodic reports and validated by third parties, such as auditors. A zakat body, be it government or be it non or quasi-government, must report both whatever the activities for zakat, for sadaqah, for waqf, periodic report. And in some jurisdiction, if we can introduce the impact report, that would be better, because not just a matter of distribution, but also the impact towards poverty alleviation, as an example. And the final recommendation is, I think we need to standardize the Sharia resolutions so that, then we can really have a very good professional management of Islamic social finance. So I think that's my short points, recommendation, as well as issues that should be addressed if we want to bring to mainstream Islamic social finance to become as important as Islamic finance. Again, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Asmi, for very insightful presentations. Prof. Asmi has highlighted so many things here. First, the example of successful ZISWAF in fulfilling the SDGs, not only for fighting zero hunger, but also to develop health facilities, school, and so on and so forth. Prof. Asmi also highlight that Islamic social finance is not a key weapon to achieve the SDGs. It's a complementary to the Islamic finance. But there are some problems faced by the Islamic social finance right now. For example, is the Islamic social finance itself is fragmented in so many countries. The problem of trust, and there is a non-enabling environment. So we still have a lot of homework to promote the Islamic social finance. Thank you so much again, Prof. Asmi. And now we move to the third speaker, Mr. Al-Tayyib. Mr. Al-Tayyib Al-Jani is currently an economic advisor of United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia and CEO of Taiba Kuwaiti Holding Corporation. Mr. Al-Dajani has over 30 years of experience in the field of international investment, Islamic banking, corporate finance, global economic and risk assessment. Mr. Tayyib Dajani is a graduate of the University of Maryland, College Park, USA, and the American University, Washington, D.C. And Mr. Tayyib Dajani was a visiting scholar at Harvard University. Mr. Al-Tayyib Dajani, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. It gives me great pleasure to present to you today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The benevolent social finance communities throughout the world and within the Western civilization in particular have been attempting to define governance ethical frameworks that propelled principled and benevolent commercial activities. Ethical finance and investment in general attempt to reduce excessive speculation and strike a balance between the benefits and vested interests of all stakeholders. Recently, initiatives globally for responsive and responsible finance and investment include ethical and impact investment, sustainable green and blue investment and finance activities that hold positive externalities to the environment, guided by social governance norms and standards. These were introduced and promulgated in the Western civilization in the past 3 or 4 decades. In essence, these norms, standards, and more have been with us for more than 1400 years, epitomized through Islamic social finance, or the Waqf economy, as some prefer to call it. The precepts of Islamic finance and banking in general are based on fairness and justice through the hadith of the Prophet, al-ghunmu bil-ghurm wal-kharaju bil-dhaman. So risk sharing and profit sharing is a precept that governs to a great extent the works of commercial activities and banking, as well as general for-profit activities within Muslim societies. And the pillars of Sharia from a macro perspective add immunity and strength to the national economies through mainly 3 prohibitions. The first is selling debt for debt. The second is excessive short selling is also prohibited, and also trading futures options exclusively for speculative purposes is prohibited. Islamic social finance, on the other hand, developed in the contemporary experience various instruments that are based on zakat, awqaf, sadaqat, qard hasan, nudhur kafarat, and the various instruments that are used in Islamic social finance. As we have estimated it in the UN various agencies, that the current funding gap to achieve the SDGs is in excess of $3 trillion. So alternative financing is a requirement in order to help achieve the SDGs by 2030 in most countries, and due to conflicts, due to fragmentation, due to divisions in various Arab countries, in particular during this stage of the historical development, and other countries throughout the world. I don't think the SDGs will be achieved in 2030, and hence there must be a continuation of various programs to assist such countries in dire situations to continue with the work to achieve the SDGs beyond 2030. So this $3 trillion funding gap to achieve the SDGs need to be in a way or another mobilized. One of the ways to look at Islamic social finance, also Christian benevolent finance, is to address the various assets under Awqaf. And the estimates for Islamic Awqaf assets is in excess of $1 trillion. So this $1 trillion, if we can manage to mobilize the resources within that portfolio and generate at least 1% income of that per annum, then I think the poor and the needy and fighting hunger will benefit tremendously. Zakat assets, people differ about how to estimate them, but some go up to $2 trillion. And the annual zakat to be spent by Muslims benevolently as an obligatory charity is in excess of $300 billion, and some estimates, including ISDB, can go up to $500 billion per annum. It's the United Nations since 2016, a year after the promulgation of the SDGs, formed a high-level committee to discuss alternative financing, including faith-based finance. And as such, Islamic finance, social finance in particular, which has an asset base equivalent to the Islamic banking and finance sector. So each one is roughly $3 trillion in total size, was tapped. And various UN agencies managed to establish funds, whether on their own with the formation of their own Sharia committees, or in conjunction and in collaboration with ISDB. So we have the UNICEF, which is a United Nations agency that cares for children, has established a Zakat fund that has specific rules and regulations that are compatible with the Zakat rules and regulations as per Sharia. And at least 1 million children have benefited from it, and the target is to increase it by 1 million each year. Poor children, where they need the least assistance that can be given to them in order to survive. Also, United Nations UNRWA, this is the refugees from Palestine. More than 600,000 refugees registered. More than 6 million Palestinian refugees were registered in this agency for the past 70 years. It also established two types of funds. One is Zakat and one is Awqaf. Also, the UNHCR, which is an agency responsible for assisting refugees other than the Palestinians, including Syrian, Yemenis, and refugees throughout the world, they have also established a Zakat fund with the ISDB in particular. And hence, these funds, standalone funds, succeeded to mobilize resources to the tune of $100 million or more, up to $500 million each. And hence, the United Nations started the dialogue the past year in order to see ways and means to enhance this effort and bring it in a consolidated fashion to existence. And the 12 sessions, dialogue sessions related to Islamic social finance, in which various stakeholders participated, from United Nations itself, various agencies throughout the world, and beyond, governments, experiences, private sector, chambers of commerces and so forth. They have been thinking at present to establish two global funds, one for zakat and one for awqaf. And these global funds, in essence, will raise funds and mobilize, collect money, zakat money, as well as awqaf money, in a way that will assist other needy UN agencies to continue their good work with refugees, with children, with fighting hunger and other sources and other uses of money that are in line with Sharia. I have prepared a small presentation. I've sent it already, but I decided not to use the presentation just to explain what I have said thus far. And hopefully the UN will play a much better role going forward in the coming decade, because this is a decade of action and beyond it, so that we will able to achieve the SDGs for the Muslim countries, 57 members of the OIC and beyond throughout the world. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Al-Tayyib, for very insightful presentations. Mr. Al-Tayyib shared his view on opportunity for Islamic social finance in managing access to wakaf and also zakat. And he also shared with us how UN also use Islamic social finance like zakat to help the poor children, refugees, and so on and so forth. Now we will go to the fourth speaker, our colleagues, Dr. Rahmatina Awaliyah Karsri. Dr. Rahmatina is currently a director of Center for Islamic Economic and Business Faculty and Business at Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Indonesia. She was previously director of Islamic Economic undergraduate program, also at Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Indonesia. Dr. Rahmatina held membership in several professional committees, including the Society for the Advancement of Socioeconomics, International Association of Islamic Economic Study Development Division at Indonesia Islamic Economic Society. Dr. Rahmatina, the time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ronald Rulindo. The Honorable Dr. Sami Suwailin, Director of IRTI, Islamic Development Bank, Professor Azmi Omar, President and Director of INSAFE, the Honorable Dr. Al-Tayyib Al-Dajani from UN ESCWA, the Honorable Dr. Ronald Rulindo, the moderator of the event, and also all the participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It is a great honor for me to be here today among my professors, Prof. Azmi, Dr. Sami, and also Dr. Al-Tayyib, to share some experience of Indonesia in relation to the role of Islamic social finance to achieve sustainable development goal. Allow me to share a presentation to make the presentation more organized. Can you see my PowerPoint, Dr. Ronald?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the agenda that I was asked to share, but I will focus more on the impact of Islamic social finance. We know that the world we live in today is without a doubt encountered with omnipresent challenges of poverty, social inequality, and environmental adversities that cannot be taken lightly. The 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development, hence, envisage a revitalized global and unconventional post-capitalist partnership for sustainable development to address such challenges. However, as has been mentioned by previous panelists and also Prof. Bambang Brojonegoro, the scale and ambition of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development call for financial and technical resources estimated between 5 to 7 trillion USD. And Prof. Bambang mentioned that it is predicted to be 70% higher after the pandemic. These are far beyond the scope of individual governments and of the multilateral funding agencies. Therefore, private sector funding, capabilities, and know-how need to be mobilized to sustain the new development agenda, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development, operationalize the policies and actions, and end poverty within a generation as soon as possible. And this is just some data about how global inequalities and also global poverty persistently exist. In this case, in sub-Saharan Africa, global poverty persistently exists. And things are deteriorated due to COVID-19 pandemic. But Islamic economics and financial system could potentially contribute to overcome these problems. The Islamic financial services industry was estimated to be worth 2.5 trillion and forecast to reach 3.2 trillion by 2024. And this represents a strong potential source of financing the SDGs, fostering development and helping to end poverty. Therefore, scholars and studies generally suggest that Islamic finance is aligned with sustainable development goals. However, it is also argued that earlier expectation and aspiration that Islamic finance would internalize the social dimension and social justice into its own operational may not materialize fully. Islamic finance has not contributed significantly to achieving SDGs due to several problems, such as high transaction costs, restrictive legal and regulatory framework, and lack of qualified human resources. Therefore, there is a need to go beyond Islamic finance, and Islamic social finance could be a solution. Now, this is to show that Islamic social finance, SDGs, and Maqasid al-Shari'ah are strongly related, as has been emphasized by the previous panelists as well. Now, before looking at the impact, I would like to briefly review the development of Islamic social finance in Indonesia. And before that as well, the term Islamic social finance, as I understand, is coined by Islamic Development Bank, introduced in 2014 by the Islamic Research and Training Institute through the Islamic Social Finance Report. So I think this is a very important legacy from the Islamic Development Bank to bring the Islamic social finance, which previously seen as traditional Islamic institution, into the mainstream Islamic finance. And after that, Indonesia, we also use terminology Islamic social finance that consists of zakat, wakaf, and Islamic microfinance. And at the moment, in Indonesia, Islamic social finance is an important part of Indonesia's Islamic economics and financial ecosystem, as you can see in front. And as of the development of Islamic social finance in Indonesia, in general, the development is very promising. As you can see, the collection of zakat and also the distribution have increased in the past few years, and also the number of zakat management organization at the moment, we have 608 the zakat management organization or OPZ. And similar development happened in wakaf institutions. Wakaf asset in the form of land in Indonesia spread over more than 420,000 locations. Cash wakaf is also considered very potential, with the estimated potential of cash wakaf accounted to 180 trillion rupiah. However, the collection of cash wakaf is still below its potential. And when we talk about Islamic microfinance in Indonesia, historically, actually Indonesia's Islamic finance development started with the introduction of Islamic microfinance in the so-called BMT, Baitul Mal wa Tamwil institution in 1983. And Islamic microfinance institution have developed gradually, showed a relatively good performance. At the moment, more than 5,000 BMTs and 81 BPRS, Islamic rural banks. So this is the conclusion. Now, the next question is about the impact of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs in Indonesia. Generally speaking, In measuring the impact of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs, practical measure is an issue as there is no global consensus regarding the measurement. However, a number of studies have attempted to measure the impact of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs by using the currently available method. For example, the National Zakat Board of Indonesia, Basnas, note a remarkable drop of poverty among the mustahik or zakat recipient, around 31% in 1 year. So zakat have contributed positively, significantly in achieving SDG number 1, no poverty, and SDG number 10. Also, when we look at SDG number 3 and SDG number 4, in Indonesia, almost all zakat organizations have health programs and also education programs to complement the government programs. The programs include free health services for mustahik and establishment of health facilities, and also many education programs in terms of free school, for example. And a study reported that the social return on investment from a Smart Excellencia, it's a free boarding school, Islamic boarding school program, is 32 by 1. It means that every 1 rupiah invested generates social return, social value of 32 rupiah. So this is a very high social return on investment. Then another example of success story of achievement of SDGs is zakat and implementation of SDG 6, clean water sanitation. This is a huge issue in Indonesia and in many countries. And in 2015, Basnas and the Islamic Council of Indonesia, supported by UNICEF, attempted to enhance the role of zakat for financing programs related to the WASH sector, the water, sanitation, and hygiene program. The Majelis Ulama Indonesia even issued fatwa to support the allocation of zakat fund for WASH sector. And following that, few zakat organizations have started programs related to clean water and sanitation. The few include Las Harfa in Banten and Basnas in NTB province. So the Basnas program in NTB, for example, they renovate the uninhabitable houses and implement the concept of house renovation accompanied by improvement on the sanitation facilities. They call it the Jambanisasi program. Jamban is the Indonesian name for latrine for sanitation facilities. Another interesting example is the so-called latrine rotating saving. This is Arisan Jamban. This is a community-led total sanitation program conducted by Las Harfa, and it is also in cooperation with a charitable organization from Australia. And also in relation to SDG 17, UNDP has signed, for example, MOU with Basnas to conduct a pilot project for micro hydro power plant in Jambi, and also establishment of a Center of Excellence Islamic Finance in collaboration between IDB and UNDP and also Basnas. This is to show that partnership in development is also implemented. Now, however, we realize that in Indonesia, there are still challenges to be overcome. Opportunities are there because Indonesia is the largest Muslim population in the world, the most generous country according to the CIF World Giving Index. The potential of Islamic social finance is also very large. Stronger government support can be seen in the past few years. And also digital adaptation. It is currently a lifestyle in Indonesia to use digital methods. However, the challenges are also abundant in terms of, most importantly, low literacy, despite high awareness of Indonesian Muslims who support the Islamic social finance and Islamic economics. Quality of human resources, governance and trust, the issue that has been addressed by Prof. Azmi, the lack of infrastructure and lack of integration with other Islamic economic sector. Now, this is just to show the low literacy index of Islamic finance in Indonesia and also zakat and wakaf. And the challenges faced by Islamic social finance in Indonesia is actually similar to the problem faced by Islamic social finance globally. At least there are 4 challenges identified by a study: higher portfolio yield for Islamic microfinance institution, problem of governance model, limitation to measure social values and social impacts, and funding scarcity. And therefore, we need to develop strategies to accelerate the impact of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs, as you can see in front. But I want to highlight that the importance of innovation and integration of Islamic social finance institution with other Islamic social finance sector. And at the moment in Indonesia, as has been emphasized by Prof. Bambang, blending Islamic social finance and Islamic commercial finance is an innovation that currently undergoing in Indonesia. So collaboration between Islamic commercial and social finance in performing the financing is being done in Indonesia, and it is often associated with the so-called cash wakaf link sukuk instrument. So this is one example how Islamic social finance is blended with Islamic commercial finance. However, this is a new initiative. This is the scheme for cash wakaf link sukuk, and we are still looking at the development. This is also the first issue. It is used to build a glaucoma and retina center at Wakaf Eye Hospital. And therefore, we need to encourage more innovative Islamic blended financing. For example, this is the Green Wakaf Framework has just issued this morning by Badan Wakaf Indonesia and UNDP. And this is also a scheme for Wakaf for renewable investment. And there are a lot of opportunities, but also many more challenges of Islamic blended financing. For example, societies tend to be sensitive regarding the use of social funds for infrastructure. So this is potentially harming the potential to use it, Islamic blended finance. And then the paradigm of social and commercial separation, and also other challenges similar to Islamic social finance. This is actually a research that currently undergoing in our center, and we are hopefully to release the results soon. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. I agree with the other panelists that Islamic social finance is very potential to support realization of SDGs. However, Islamic social finance alone cannot and will not be able to achieve the objective. It has to be integrated and blended with other Islamic financial instruments. Proper implementation strategies must also be designed such that the initiatives could be consolidated, developed, and eventually be mainstreaming into the economy and delivering the expected high impact. Collaboration and support, including political will, is needed to optimize the impact of Islamic social finance toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I would like to end by quoting this verse from the Quran, and cooperate in righteousness and purity, but do not cooperate in sin and aggression. So I hope this presentation would be useful to all of us, and we could do more collaboration to optimize the impact of Islamic social finance to achieve SDGs in the future. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahmatina, for the very informative presentation on how Indonesia has used Islamic social finance to achieve the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, we go to the Q&A session. Please, if you have a question, you can ask the question. Type in the Q&A box. But up to now, I have a few questions with me. First, from Mr. Aruna Gohil. I think he also provoked by Mr. Sami Al-Swalim questions about do we use zakat only for consumption or for production? So maybe Dr. Sami, Mr. Aruna maybe would like to know, would be in the future the trend of using zakat for production will be, I mean, we can see more use of zakat for product production in the future, and or have IDB as implemented already? Please.
Thank you very much. Let me elaborate one point, how to combine long-term solutions for short-term needs. Take, for example, food security. Now, food is consumption by nature, right? And you cannot say we don't need the food. Of course, everyone needs food, and this is an essential need. Now, how to support food security? We can either simply buy food from one country and then distribute it to the poor, or we can dedicate a land as waqf, and this land will be used to produce crops in a sustainable manner, such that we are able to, at least in part, secure the needs for food for at least some of the population in the community. So there are Islamic principles of finance, whether commercial or social or non-profit or for-profit, they provide the necessary framework, but it is up to us to really translate these principles into long-term sustainable solutions that meet both the short-term and the long-term. And I am proud to say that our colleagues in the Islamic Development Bank Group are working on several fronts, not only one. The bank has already developed a strategy for food security. From our side in the Institute, we are working on long-term solutions along the line that we have just raised. But of course, this is something we all need to work together. But the point is that we should focusing on long-term solutions, sustainable solutions for our pressing needs, and not to be overtaken by the needs of the hour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sami. Now, we have a question to Prof. Azmi Omar. Prof, you said that we need to develop the enabling environment for Islamic social finance, but actually where we should start from, Prof, and who responsible for it?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned, not all countries have the enabling environment for Islamic social finance. For example, my experience is that in some countries, for example, in Central Asia, they do not have regulations for zakat as well as wakaf. So it's something new to them. So again, as we said, the importance of having multilateral bodies such as Islamic Development Bank to come up with a template for zakat, wakaf, and that can be then copied and implemented across different OIC jurisdictions. So it's important to have that. We need to have a very good template that can be used by all countries. Because without a strong enabling environment, we do know that the question of trust, the question of standardization will not be able to achieve. If you take the case of Islamic finance, for example, one of the key things that any country that are interested to implement Islamic finance is they then develop Islamic banking regulations. So in a similar context, enabling environment is a must or a prerequisite. However, there are, apart from the regulation, there are standards, governance framework, and so on, that can be done later on. So regulation must be put in place first, and subsequently other supporting standards, guidelines, and so on can be developed to bring about more efficient Islamic social finance in the respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Azmi. And now I have a question for Mr. Al-Tayyib. Mr. Tayyib, would you share with us, is there United Nations already have a roadmap or plan on how to optimize Islamic social finance for the OIC country or Muslim majority countries, maybe?
Yes, the roadmap is currently under preparation by His Excellency, the Special Advisor to the Secretary General, Dr. Ahmed Mreikhi, an ex-ambassador from Qatar Foreign Ministry and an expert on Islamic social finance. an activist as well. So that roadmap had in effect two alternative routes to decide which route to take. One is a centralized route, as I mentioned during my presentation, that a global Zakat fund and another global Awqaf fund sponsored by the United Nations, managed by one of the agencies within the United Nations, and it is proposed that the custodian would be the ISDB to be established. And this fund, will have its terms and conditions for establishment. It's sovereign entity, it's independent legal financial entity. On one hand, it will have a very highly trusted custodian, hopefully the ISDB, and it will have as well thorough and comprehensive due diligence, governance, transparency, as well as usage of fourth industrial revolution tools in order to achieve better results in terms of fighting hunger, assisting the poor, assisting refugees, and so forth. So it will have a platform, hopefully, developed in association with the management terms and conditions, management responsibilities of such two global funds. One for Zakat with specific uses of funds as per the Quran, 8 specific uses, and the Awqaf is more general. So uses can go up to 80 or 100, not yet determined for sure. But the roadmap, in essence, covers most of these questions and issues, as well as the charter of such funds in their preliminary draft forms have been discussed at this stage, and hopefully a decision will be made on which route to take, a decentralized route or a centralized route, and the various agencies that I mentioned during my presentation, UN, UNRWA, UNICEF for children, UNHCR for refugees, as well as others, can also have their funds existing in parallel, and if needs exceed the existing resources available in their funds, which are in the neighborhood of, or in the range of 100 million to maximum $500 million each. And as I said, the funding gap for achieving the SDGs is close to $3 trillion per year from here until the year 2030. Then probably these global macro funds for Zakat and Awqaf, and in the future, hopefully other faiths will follow suit. But I think the Muslim faiths will have and has the greatest resources in terms of social finance in general and benevolent social finance in particular. Therefore, it can take a lead among other faiths, including Christianity, of course. And as such, hopefully, this whole effort and this whole dialogue will culminate in establishment of proper platforms, proper structures for global funds that reflect positively on the beautiful experience of the Islamic civilization throughout the past 1400 years. And thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tayyip. And we have a last question from Anonymous, but it's a very interesting question about cryptocurrency in Islamic finance. Do you think we could use cryptocurrency for Islamic social finance, especially to help us to solve the SDGs problem? It's quite a difficult question, I think, but maybe Dr. Rahmatina, Prof. Azmi, or Dr. Sami would like to give your opinion.
We can get Dr. Rahmatina first.
Okay. Yeah, cryptocurrencies and Islamic social finance, yeah, Dr. Ronald, yeah. I think it is possible to get the opportunities from for example, the principles of like the ledger that you use in the cryptocurrencies principle to improve transparency and accountability in practicing Islamic social finance. For example, Waqaf. I think there are some ideas on how Waqaf
how transparency and accountability in Wakaf management system could be improved by using the cryptocurrencies system. And this is, like you said, this is open to discussion and should be explored more in the future, hopefully.
Thank you, Dr. Rahma. Prof. Asmi or Dr. Sami?
Okay, maybe I shall try to give my 2 cents worth of views on this. The cryptocurrency is at the moment not a currency per se. It is used as speculative or investment, depending on how you look at it. Asset, it is a digital asset, but not used as a currency like what we meant typically as money to buy things. It can be used for investment as well as it can be used for speculative activities. And of course, the technology can be based on blockchain. So at the moment, if you look at cryptocurrencies, obviously, I think if somebody owns cryptocurrencies, the first thing I would say is that they are zakatable as well. And of course, cryptocurrencies can be used to support Islamic social finance because it has certain value. One can sell that cryptocurrency and use real money for Islamic social finance support. So in that regard, a number of countries have recognized cryptocurrencies to be traded and Sharia compliant, so long as it is properly regulated. For example, in Malaysia, the Securities Commission and as well as the Sharia Advisory Council of Securities Commission Malaysia has made a ruling that to say that digital assets, including cryptocurrencies, are mal, so they are valuable, they can be traded, but they are not currency. So that's the view at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Asmi. Maybe Dr. Sami and Mr. Taib would like to add something? No?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Make one quick comment, if you don't mind. I agree with the comment of Professor Azmi that cryptocurrencies are actually not currencies, despite the name and despite probably the objective of the founders. In any case, we can use the technology, the blockchain, to encrypt and make the Islamic financial tools available to the public. For example, we can have crypto sukuk, which means we can tokenize the sukuk and use the blockchain to verify and authenticate the issuance, the distribution, the value, etc. of the sukuk, and make it available to the public. This could be one way to capitalize on the technology in a fruitful and productive manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. I think we just received one last question from Amrin Fariki. He asked how potential Wakaf-based financing system could support infrastructure finance in developing countries. Maybe a short answer from Prof. Asmi or Dr. Sami, maybe?
Maybe Dr. Sami, because he can talk from the IDB perspective in that regard. Yeah.
Please, Dr. Sami.
So can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, he asked about the prospect of using Wakaf-based financing.
Wakaf debt financing?
Wakaf-based financing. Wakaf financing.
Maybe you can talk a bit about Afif, Dr. Sami.
Well, of course, financing Awqaf, yes, I think that's a very important point. The Islamic Development Bank established a dedicated fund for financing Awqaf assets or Awqaf, buildings and constructions and so on. That would be important for generating revenue for the Awqaf. But it seems to me that the author is elaborating his question, how potential Waqf-based financing system could support infrastructure. Yes, that could be. See, Waqf is a tool. It can be used in various or for various objectives, whether for building Awqaf assets, whether for food security, whether for education, health, for example. All these objectives are valid objectives, and Waqf can be used. And historically, most of the schools and hospitals throughout the Islamic history were funded through Waqf. Nowadays, most or many of the very important hospitals and schools and universities in the West are funded through Waqf-like or foundations or endowments in the West. So yes, this is it's very possible to capitalize on Waqf as a means for supporting social objectives. I don't know if this answered the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sami. Ladies and gentlemen, finally we reached to the end of this session today. Please give a virtual applause to our 4 speakers for the very informative, insightful, and also entertaining sessions. And let me finish this session by saying thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And I return the time to Afida. Thank you, Afida.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. All right, thank you very much for Dr. Sami Al-Suailam, Dr. Asmi Omar, Dr. Al-Tayyab Al-Dajani, Dr. Rahmatina, and also our moderator, Dr. Ronald, for such enlightening remarks and fruitful discussion. Distinguished T20 community, we've heard and hopefully internalized today's session on how to enhance interface contributions to SDG standard financing. On behalf of Task Force 9 T20 Indonesia, I would like to thank all of the speakers again, Dr. Sami Al-Suailam, Dr. Asmi Omar, Dr. Al-Tayyab Al-Dajani, Dr. Rahmatina for such insightful session. I would like to also thank LPM FEBUI and PEBS for organizing this event as well. My name is Afida, and on the organizing academy's behalf, I would like to thank all the attendees for your great enthusiasm and engagement throughout this event. If you are missing the earlier part of today's session, it will be available on LPM YouTube at LPM FEBUI. We thank you all for making time to join us today. Stay safe and healthy, and I wish you all a very good evening from here in Jakarta. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Prof. Asmi, Dr. Sami, Mr. Tayyib.
Al-Tayyib.
See you.
Thank you so much.
Berawal dari visi besar untuk menjadi institusi terdepan di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis syariah untuk pembangunan Indonesia dan masyarakat global, pada tahun 2007, Pusat Ekonomi dan Bisnis Syariah atau PEBS resmi didirikan. PEBS merupakan institusi di bawah Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Indonesia yang ditujukan untuk menjadi Center of Excellence bagi kegiatan penelitian, konsultasi, pelatihan, dan pengabdian masyarakat sesuai kebutuhan akademik, industri, dan masyarakat. Selama 14 tahun berdiri, PEBS telah membangun kerjasama akademik dan non-akademik, serta melayani konsultasi dan advokasi yang berkaitan dengan ekonomi, bisnis, dan keuangan syariah, serta ekonomi pembangunan, dengan mitra yang berasal dari lembaga nasional dan internasional. Pada tahun 2020, PEBS secara resmi mendirikan 9 klaster penelitian. Dengan salah satu misi untuk mengembangkan dan meningkatkan fasilitas dan infrastruktur pendukung bagi ekonomi dan keuangan syariah di Indonesia, PEBS menyelenggarakan berbagai pelatihan yang ditujukan untuk akademisi, industri, regulator, dan masyarakat umum. Selain itu, pada tahun 2020, PEBS memperkenalkan program Summer School dalam bidang ekonomi dan keuangan syariah pertama di Indonesia yang terdiri dari kelas Islamic Finance Practice Course dan Islamic Finance Course for Academician. Tidak hanya itu, sebagai institusi di bawah FEBUI, PEBS secara berkala mempersembahkan seminar dan webinar yang disajikan dalam bentuk online lecture session, interactive discussion, maupun case study, serta edukasi ekonomi syariah yang disajikan dalam bentuk video, infografis, dan juga survei singkat. Dan dalam rangka mendukung pendidikan tinggi, PEBS juga secara berkala membuka program magang. Melalui core values kami, yakni adaptive, inovative, and insightful, PEBS berkomitmen untuk menjadi yang terdepan dalam mendorong perkembangan ekonomi dan keuangan syariah untuk pembangunan Indonesia dan masyarakat global yang lebih adil, sejahtera, dan berkelanjutan.